Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel Ink and Pages. In this video, I'm going to be telling you all about all of the series I am currently in the middle of reading. I've seen a couple of other people do videos about this, and I found them all really interesting. And I like stats and figures and analysing my own reading, so I thought it would be cool to work out exactly how many series I am technically in the middle of and to tell you about them. So I'm going to start off with the series I have been reading technically for the longest and then finish with the series I started most recently. So we're going to start off with the Game of Thrones books, aka A Song of Ice and Fire, as they are technically known. I started reading these, I think, in like 2011 or 12, meaning it has been over 10 years. I've technically been in the middle of the series, but I mean, everyone else is as well, because the series hasn't even finished yet. 2 of the 7 books haven't even been published yet, so like, I'm not worried. I'm up to date. I've read all of the books that are currently out. There's 5 books currently out, but in the UK, 2 of them were split into 2 volumes. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books here already, but technically this is only 5 books. I've got 7 volumes of 5 books, is maybe how we'll call it. This is, you know, the epic fantasy series in Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms. That was a really good TV show for quite a long time, and then a really terrible TV show for the end of that time. So yeah, I'm literally in the same boat as everyone else who has read these series and is up to date. We're still waiting for book 6 to come. Has it got a release date? No. Has he even finished writing it? No. Has he started writing it? That's anyone's guess at this point. Next we have a duology, which, fun fact, is a term I did not know existed until I found BookTube, and it is the Villains Duology by V.E. Schwab. The first book is called Vicious, the second one is called Vengeful, and this is kind of about supervillains who used to be best friends and are now, you know, mortal enemies, and they found a way to give themselves superpowers, and then things spiraled from there. I read this book in 2015 and I really loved it. In fact, my only criticism of it was that for a standalone, the ending sure felt like she had just changed it at the last minute to set it up for a sequel. And when this was written, it was a single book. It was meant to be a standalone, I believe. And then I don't think it was until several years later that she announced she was writing a sequel, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, because the ending of this, it just felt slightly out of place. It felt like it was setting up for a sequel that at that point didn't exist, and I didn't like that. I still don't know how I feel about this getting a sequel. I haven't read the sequel yet, clearly. I think I would like to reread Vicious before I eventually get to Vengeful, and I do genuinely think this is a book that would hold up. I think I would still love it 6 years later. I really doubt my feelings would change towards it that much. Like, there's a couple of books I look back on that I gave 5 stars and I think, oh, I definitely wouldn't give that 5 stars if I reread it today. But I really think I would give this one 5 stars again. So here's hoping that does eventually happen, and I like Vengeful just as much, and it feels complete as a story once I've read the second book. Next, I have the Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. I've got this cool little box set of them, and all of the covers have like a similar sort of circle design on them, so they all kind of match up if you were to put them next to each other, which is quite cool. I've only read the first book. I've only read Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy. I haven't read the other 4. They are, you know, the classic sci-fi series about a guy called Arthur Dent, who suddenly finds the Earth destroyed by some aliens who wanted to get rid of it so they could build an intergalactic highway through the space where it was. And it's a very fun, playful, kind of silly story, and the writing style really reflects that as well. It's very playful and kind of ridiculous at times. And I enjoyed the first book. I didn't like love it, but it was fun, and I would eventually like to read the rest of them. The only thing is I've got them in a box set, so I can't, well, I could, but I'm not dividing them between my main books, which are all of my read books, and then my TBR shelf. Like, I do have them all together among my books as if I had read all 5 of them already, which is maybe the only lie on my bookshelves, because obviously I haven't read them all. But maybe one day soon, I will get to the other 4. Then we have some more V.E. Schwab. There's quite a few of her series on this list. It is the Shades of Magic series. I have read the first 2, The Dark Shade of Magic and The Gathering of Shadows, and the third book, this massive brick, A Conjuring of Light, has sat on my TBR shelf ever since. I read these in, I think, 2015 and then 2016. Conjuring of Light was released in 2017, and literally for the past 4 years, it has sat on my TBR shelf and stared at me every single day. However, I think that in 2022, this is going to be the series I challenge myself to reread and then finally complete. I said it in a previous video, kind of randomly off the cuff, but I am quite attached to this idea now. I think that is going to be a challenge I set myself next year, because God knows it's not going to happen this year. This is a high fantasy series, kind of about parallel Earths and parallel Londons in particular. And there are 4 of them. There's Grey London, which is kind of like our real London in the, I want to say, early 1800s. Then there's Red London, which is where our protagonist Kel comes from, which is this like amazing, lush, magic city. There's White London, which is also magic, but it's kind of like decaying from the inside because of the magic. And then there's Black London, which, you know, vanished or imploded or locked itself off years ago, and no one has been able to travel there ever since. And it was such a great series. I really loved these first 2 books. I gave them both 5 stars, and I can only imagine how much I'm gonna love A Conjuring of Light when I eventually read it. So yeah, this is next year's project, this series. I'm gonna reread the first 2, finally read A Conjuring of Light, and hopefully also give it 5 stars. So the Shades of Magic series was super popular on BookTube. Everybody loved it. Next we have another BookTube staple, which I would say that it's unfairly, maybe slightly more popular. And it is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. These are 6 of the 7 books. Technically there's another book like in between these 2. I don't own that one. This is a high fantasy series about an assassin called Selena Sardothian, and then multiple things happen, and by the time you get to, in my experience, the 5th and 6th books, it is largely unrecognizable from the series it started out as. The question is, do I like this series? And the answer to that question is, no, not really. It's not very good. But if you were to ask me, do I enjoy reading the series? It would be a reluctant yes. This is the series I kind of challenged myself to reread last year and this year, and then finally finish, because I had read the first 4 or 5, I can't remember, of the books, and I finally needed to read the last couple. As it stands of now, I have only the very last book, Kingdom of Ash, to finally read. This is again a brick of a book. It's almost as big as my head. Also here you can see a few pages are a bit crumpled from, I dropped it off my bookshelf shortly after buying it. Oops. But yeah, I am going to try and read this one by the end of this year, because I want to sort of complete that like mini challenge I set myself at the start of last year. But yeah, even though it's not particularly or objectively that good, you can't deny the enjoyment factor is there, and clearly it's doing something right, because even though I have bitched and moaned about literally every single book in the series while rereading them, I'm still here, I'm still coming back for more, I'm still pushing through the last few books of the series and kind of enjoying it at moments. Because this is such a popular series on BookTube and Bookstagram, I have been exposed to quite a few spoilers already. So I know kind of the gist of what happens in this, and I'm still here for it. I still want to finish it. Is it 1,000 pages? Oh, 900 and something? 970 something pages. I think we can round that up to 1,000 and not feel too disingenuous. But yeah, I'm finally here to see how Selena's story is going to end. And next we have, another Sarah J Maas series, I hear you ask. Well, yes, indeed. It is the Court of Thorns and Roses series, which I started very quickly after first starting the Throne of Glass series in 2015. This is the first original trilogy. It was originally just going to be 3 books. Then she wrote like a little novella that took place after the end of the 3rd book, and then she's now writing another trilogy set in the same world. I am counting all of those books as well as part of the same series, because Goodreads counts it all as one series. So I'm actually up to date on this series. I have read the first 4 books, even though I don't own the 4th one, which is Court of Silver Flames. And the main reason I don't own that book is because it's just so incredibly ugly. I'm sorry, I say it every time I talk about this series, but the cover redesign is horrible, and the colour scheme in particular for that book is an offence to like book designs. I really think it's orange and grey. It's dreadful. I'm sorry, it's so bad. And when I saw it in a Waterstones, no, in a Foils the other day, it's also enormous. It's like a really huge hardback, and I've read that book, and I know it's not that much longer than the 2nd or 3rd one. I think it might actually be maybe about the same page count as A Court of Mist and Fury. But the copy they had in the shop was as big as both of these combined. And you're thinking, Lillian, was it really that big? Are you just exaggerating for effect? No, it really was. It was enormous, and it was shocking to me how big this edition of the book is. Anyway, I have read it, which means I am up to date. I think there's going to be 2 more books, because I think it's going to be 2 trilogies. So there's going to be 6 books in total. I am up to date with the 4. So this is, yes, another ongoing series for me that I am actually caught up with currently. Next is another V.E. Schwab series. This is the Monsters of Verity duology. The first book, This Savage Song, I read in 2016 while I was doing my study abroad here in Germany. I was incredibly miserable. I actually read this book twice in a row because I liked it that much and I was that desperate for like entertainment and joy in my life. And so I bought the second book, Our Dark Duet, quite soon after and just haven't read it, just haven't picked it up yet. These books take place in a world where violence creates monsters. So there are a couple of different kinds of monsters. There's like a sort of shadow monster, and then there's a monster which sort of, I think, like eats your soul using music. And there's another one I can't remember, but I really liked it. It was very creepy, and I genuinely don't know why I haven't read it yet. Maybe this is another one to finish next year. Maybe next year is the year I finally finish all the V. Schwab series. Who knows? Sleeping Giants and Waking Gods are the first 2 books in the Themis series. I think that's how I pronounce it. There's 3 of them in total. I've read the first book. I own the second book. I have not got the third book, which I think is called Only Human. This is a science fiction series about people discovering parts of a giant alien robot scattered across the world and trying to collect them and put them together. At least that's what the first book is about. I imagine the second book is going to just go absolutely nuts, judging by what happened at the end of the first book, but I don't really know. And this is actually the only series I think I've ever enjoyed that has been told through mixed media, because most of the story in this is told through diary entries and interviews and voice logs and things like that, which I normally really hate, but this book did it really well. I actually have read this book twice. The second time I listened to it on an audiobook because everyone said it was so amazing, and I thought, well, yeah, the format probably lends itself really well to an audiobook, and it absolutely did. The audiobook is really, really good. And so when I felt the urge to read the second book, I decided I want to listen to the audiobook of that as well, but then the audiobook was just like really expensive, so I decided to wait until it became a bit cheaper, and then sort of forgot about it and never bought it or listened to the second book. But it was such a cool series, I would like to return to it one day and eventually finish it. Next we have a load of different graphic novel series, because I sort of got into all of these about the same time because I've heard about them on BookTube. So first of all, we have maybe the most famous BookTube graphic novel series, which is the Saga series by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is another science fiction series. It's about 2 people from opposite sides of this alien intergalactic war who have fallen in love and who have a baby at the very beginning of the story. And then things just spiral from there. It's so interesting. It's so funny and graphic at times. Like, it's definitely not a graphic novel you would give to, you know, your like niece thinking, oh, she'll like the pretty pictures. Like, no, very much for adults only. And the plot is just so well done throughout all of this series. There's so many moving parts and different characters who are on different sides and have their own little agendas. And sometimes, you know, they vanish for a couple of volumes and then they'll show up again. You think, oh my God, it's that guy again from volume 2. Remember him? It's just so well and intricately plotted. And I own and have read the first 6 of the 9 volumes that are currently out. I think after they did the 9th volume, they took a little bit of a break. I don't know how many volumes they plan on it being overall, but I think there's currently 9 out, so I still have 3 to catch up on. And then presumably they're gonna start up the story again, but I don't know like where in the story, where in the plot they pause, like whether it's a natural ending, whether any more series they'll do will continue the original story or act as a sequel. Like, I've been quite good at not being spoiled on what I have not read yet. But this is maybe my second favourite graphic novel series I've ever read. The first favourite I have ever read is the Monstrous graphic novel series by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I just adore this series with all of my brain and all of my heart and all of my soul. This story is kind of a fantasy, science fiction, steampunk mix. It's about our main character, Micah, who has this sort of dark force living inside her, and she has to try and work out what it is, why it's there, what it wants, what she can do with it, while the rest of the world sort of descends back into this war that's been brewing for a long time between the different factions of people and the different fantasy races. And it is just so cool. My favorite thing about this is its complexity and its world building. With a lot of fantasy stories, people like to compare the world building to benchmarks like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, which I would say, in my experience, have, you know, some of the best, most developed, far-reaching world building in those stories. I think if you were to compare Monstrous to that kind of world building, I would genuinely be on your side, because it is so good, it is so well done, everything is connected, not one single detail is overlooked or out of place, and you really have to pay attention to everything, to every character, every little tiny like reference to something, because it will all tie together in the end. It might take 2, 3, 4 volumes to be fully realized and be fully explained to you, but you can read it safe and comforted in the knowledge that everything will make sense and everything does tie together so perfectly because they've planned it out expertly from the very beginning. So I have the first 4 volumes here. I have the 5th one. The 5th one's on my TBR shelf. So I've read the first 4, I own the 5th one. The 6th volume has recently been released. So I technically have 2 volumes to catch up on, and I just love it. I kind of savor this series. I always reread all the previous volumes before I read the newest one because I just love it so much. I just love it so much. Next is maybe the weirdest graphic novel series I've ever read. I have the first volume of the Odyssey graphic novel series. This is by Matt Fraction and Christian Ward, and it is a psychedelic space opera gender-bent retelling of the Odyssey. In my last year of university, I did a unit on the Odyssey and its different retellings, and so when I saw this in the Waterstones in Bristol, I was like, right, it's fate, I've got to have it. A graphic novel, and it's the Odyssey. Yes, please. And I read it, and it is maybe the weirdest, one of the weirdest things I've ever read. It's so just weird. There's not really a better way to explain it. It's so psychedelic and twisty and confusing and surreal quite a lot of the time. I did really like this book. It maybe not as much as I was hoping to, but my love for the story of the Odyssey will allow me to overlook quite a lot of flaws. So I do want to continue with this series. I believe there's actually only one other volume. I don't know if it's finished and the story is complete, or they just stopped or gave up, or I don't know, ran out of money halfway through making it. I hope it's the first one. I hope that when I eventually read the second volume, it'll wrap everything up nicely, but I mean, I really have no idea. And with a story as weird and surreal as this, like, who really knows what's going on half the time? And the last graphic novel series I'm currently reading, this one comes with an asterisk, I'll explain, is the Rat Queens graphic novels. I have the first 3. I have read all of these. There are, I think, 8 in total. But the weird thing about the Rat Queens series is the 3rd one ends with kind of a massive cliffhanger, and I was really there for it because I think the 3rd one for me was the most interesting novel. It really delved deep into the backstory of some of the characters. It ended so well, like I really liked the story in it and I really liked the cliffhanger and I was so excited to read on. But then everyone said that the 4th one was kind of like a soft reboot of the series, and I was like, what? But the 3rd one ended on a cliffhanger. How can you just ignore that? What's going on? And so I found the 4th book in Waterstones and started flipping through it. And yeah, it just like never addresses the huge, important, poignant cliffhanger that the 3rd one ended with. And I was like, I don't know how I can continue with the series and not have that addressed. So I've yet to go back and continue reading any of the other volumes in this series. I have since heard that the 5th volume apparently gives some insight into what happened with the cliffhanger in the 3rd one. I don't know if that's going to be enough for me. I think that just is so weird. That's like not good plotting or writing. I think there were quite a lot of changes behind the scenes. They've changed the artist like every 1 or 2 volumes at this point. And then I think they changed the writer, I think for the 6th volume. So like, I don't really know what was going on there. I think this is unfortunately a series that starts very promisingly and then just immediately went downhill from the point where I stopped reading. So I'm still a bit torn about whether I'm ever going to go back to it. Maybe I'll read like the 4th and 5th volumes just so I can actually find out what happened with this major cliffhanger that like I really loved and was super invested in. I think I'm just a bit bitter at this point because of how they chose to continue the series, but like maybe I'll go back. Maybe I'll go back. So yeah, this isn't, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm currently in the middle of this series because I don't know whether I'm actually going to continue it. We'll see. I'm just including it here on a technicality. Next is the Kiss Quotient series by Helen Huang. This is a romance series. They are actually companion books, not direct sequels of each other, so they don't follow the same characters in each book, but it is considered to be the same series. I've read the first book, The Kiss Quotient. I read a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it. I don't read that much romance, and I also don't enjoy that much romance in my books, but this was a really good romance novel, and so I would like to continue with the other ones at some point. This is quite a popular series because, well, it's a great romance series, first of all, but also it has some Own Voices autism rep, which I didn't know going into it, and so yeah, one day I would like to read books 2 and 3. Next we have the Lord of the Rings books by J.R.R. Tolkien, obviously. I am including them on this list, even though I have technically read them all before, but I'm including them because I'm currently rereading them very slowly. At the moment I'm listening to an audiobook of the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring. It's like 19 hours long and I'm listening to it each night before I go to bed because it's just very soothing and I find it very easy to fall asleep to. The only problem with this is I'll literally only listen to a tiny fraction of it before I fall asleep and then I forget where I was, and so I'm making very slow progress through it, but I am enjoying it. And the audiobook I'm listening to, which is the Rob Inglis version, is amazing. I love it so much. I would highly recommend it. But yeah, it's very slow going. So maybe I'll hope to finish this series in the next, I don't know, 5 years at this rate. And next we have a series that may also take me many years to finish because of the rate at which the books are being written, and it is the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch. The first book is The Lies of Locke Lamora. I read it last year and was really surprised actually by how much I liked it. Everyone said it was a fantasy heist, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And I read it and it was really good. It's so clever, it's so well plotted and meticulous in everything that it does, while also being full of great characters and very emotional at times. This is the first of a 7-book series, of which only the first 4 books have actually been published. The next 3 are just sailing in the winds of Scott Lynch's mind. I don't know what's going on with them. Does he know what's going on with them? I have no idea. We're still all waiting. When I read this book, I did think it could kind of function as a standalone. If you ignore like 5% of it, it could work as a standalone. So that's how I'm going to continue to think of it until we get some updates on the next few books. Okay, we're almost done now. The next series is the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. I have only read the first book of these, Every Heart a Doorway, which I read last year, actually during the same readathon that I read The Lies of Locke Lamora for, and again, really liked it. Another 4-star. I would love to continue with this series, and the only reason I have not is that I want to get them all in hardback, like this one. I want to get them all in matching editions, and they're just a little bit more expensive than all the other books I want. And so whenever I put them on, you know, a birthday wish list or a Christmas wish list, people get me the other books and not this one. So I think I need to like step up and buy myself this book as a treat for myself. There are, how many books in this series are out now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books are currently out. The 7th book is coming out in January. So I really need to catch up. Luckily, they're very tiny books. They're very short, and I pretty much inhaled this book in one go when I read it, so I think I will be able to do the same to the other books. But I love this book so much, and I like the premise of the series so much that I think it's possible, I see the possibility of this becoming an all-time favourite series for me as soon as I actually get my arse in gear and read beyond the first book. Speaking of favourite series, next we have the Six of Crows duology. The first book is Six of Crows, the second one is Crooked Kingdom. I read Six of Crows earlier this year and I do consider it my favourite book I've read so far this year. I don't think anything could top it, But I've been putting off reading Crooked Kingdom because I don't want this series to be over. I don't want to leave the world. I'm very happy to just live in limbo for a little while longer and consider the series like ongoing forever because I don't want it to be done. This is another magical heist book. There are 6 main characters and they get together to do an impossible heist, and I loved it. And I also loved the fact that I loved it as much as everyone told me I would love it, because there was so much hype around this book. I think this was one of the most hyped books I've ever read, and it somehow still managed to deliver on every single element. It was pretty much perfect. I loved it so much. 6 out of 5 stars if I could, and I just need to bring myself to read Crooked Kingdom. I need to be brave and finish the series because I do want to finish it, but I also want to live in the world forever. But then I can also reread it, and I've been spoiled. I've been spoiled on what happens in chapter 40 or whatever, which is really, really fucking annoying, and I could have lived without that knowledge. Thanks Instagram for spoiling me. So that is kind of another reason why I don't want to finish this book. But also, that spoiler, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. Still really annoying. It's not the worst thing that could have happened. I like all the other characters better, is all I'll say. But yeah, this is my white whale. Is that the right way to use that expression? I don't know. But I love it so much. I love it so much. And it's gonna break my heart. One day it's gonna break my heart when I can bring myself to read it. And finally, the last series I started reading this year that I'm currently in the middle of is the Singing Hills cycle. The first one is The Empress of Song Fortune by Nevo. There is a second book that's come out called, oh my god, When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. There we are. I always want to call it When the Tiger Came for Tea. It's not called When the Tiger Came for Tea. It's called When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. There's also a third book that I think has been announced but has not been released yet. I think it's going to be released early next year. But I really, really liked this first book. I think all of the books are going to be similar in that there's going to be a story that happened a while ago which is now being recounted to our main character, who is a cleric whose job it is to record history. So this story, our cleric, they are told about the Empress, the titular Empress, and her story and what happened with her and her handmaiden, Rabbit, who is the one telling the cleric the story. And so I imagine in the second and third books, they're going to meet a new character who is going to tell them all about their life history or a particular chapter of it. And I think that's what each of the books is going to be about. But I really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm very excited to read the second and third ones. So that's all of them. If I've counted correctly, it should be 18 series I'm currently in the middle of. That kind of surprises me, but then again, lots of other people who I've seen do this video have been in the middle of 30 plus series, so in that respect, I'm not doing too badly. I am actually caught up on quite a lot of these books. There's not much more I could do for them. A couple of the series, yes, I am quite far behind and I need to read 5 or something books to catch up, but I'm also not someone who tries to put a lot of pressure on myself to finish series. If I do set myself a challenge to finish off particular series, like with the Throne of Glass books last year and this year, and like I'm planning to do with the Shades of Magic books next year, it's for fun, and I still don't consider it a very pressurized goal. So yeah, I'm here to read, I'm here to have fun, I'm here to read series I love, and hopefully eventually finish those series I love, and that's it. But I would also genuinely love to know how many series you consider yourself to be in the middle of reading. I think it would be very cool to compare our numbers and see how we're doing. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!